Let's all say amen. Amen. It's good to be here, and certainly we thank God for Matthew, thank God for each and every one of you, and thank God for the presence of His Holy Spirit. We have two wonderful presenters that are going to come and share with us. First of all, we have Mr. Greg Davis that's going to come. He's a graduate of the University of Alabama, Birmingham, also of the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, longtime president of First Priority, newly elected and selected to lead up ALCAP, Alabama Citizen Action Program, and also Alabama Character Builders. We're delighted to have him. And then we're also delighted to have Mrs. Joi Wasill, who's going to come and share with us in her own way. She's a graduate of the University of Mississippi with a degree in public administration. She finished her requirements for an educator in Tennessee at Middle Tennessee State University, married, has a son that attends University of Alabama. She's also a specialist in sexual avoidance risks, and we just thank God for her, and she's going to come. She's the executive director for Decision, Choices, and Options. Let's give them a hand and receive them. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's a great introduction. Best one I've had in a while. A couple of weeks ago, the guy who was supposed to introduce me didn't show up. I introduced myself. Other than that, that was the best one so far. Good to be with you guys. I'm just going to sort of get us started. All right, just a couple of moments just to say good morning to you and give you a little overview and maybe a little update for the work of ALCAP. And we appreciate you guys so much. I know some of you support us directly through your missions budget. When you give to the cooperative program, of course, you're supporting the work that we're undertaking. And I am replacing Dr. Joe Godfrey. A lot of you know Dr. Joe, and he's retiring at the end of April. And so I've been working alongside him now for the last few months and learning a lot, meeting a lot of people, introducing him to a few people as well. And it's been a real collaborative work, he and I together. And he's going to remain on with us as a consultant for a good while also, and continue to use his influence. But we represent Alabama Baptist in Montgomery. We're sort of your missionaries to Montgomery, although you can come on short-term mission project with us to the State House one day if you'd like to. We'd love to have you come down. Brother Morris was down a few weeks ago and led prayer for us on the State House steps. We had a big prayer rally on the first day of session. I spent 30 years in youth ministry, 25 with First Priority here in Alabama. And, all those years in youth ministry, the thing I'm finding is that going to the legislator ministry there's not a lot of difference. We got ready to, in a lot of ways, there's not much difference. We got ready to sort of try to do something down there. ALCAP had hosted a prayer breakfast for many years, but that's just not really feasible right now with all the COVID stuff. And so my first reaction was, well, let's see you at the poll like the teenagers do. Let's have it at the State House. So that's what we did on January the 11th, and was a good time, and we'll plan to do that year in, year out. But we represent you guys down there, Alabama Baptist, ministering the good news to our elected lawmakers and sharing Christian values in the hallways and the offices, and representing our values on religious liberty, issues dealing with life, of course, and addictive issues which are so detrimental to the family, like alcohol or gambling or drugs, those kind of things. Making sure that we stay in front of them. I tell you what I'm learning though, and I knew this, but what I'm learning even more so is even more effective than Joe and I being down there is for you to come. But then second of all is for you to pick up the phone and make a call to your representatives, to your state representatives or your state senator, is to call them, or if you know them, is to stay in contact with them. It really makes a big difference when they know that a pastor back home is paying attention, number one, and that they're willing to call them and let them know where they stand, because that you represent a lot of people. And so when they hear back from home, especially when they hear back home from a pastor, that really makes a big difference. It gets their attention when we tell them we represent Alabama Baptist, over 4,000 churches and Free Will Baptists and Nazarenes across the state. It does get their attention, but not nearly as much as one phone call from you. So if you don't know who your state senator is or your state representative in particular, go to our website, alcap.com, and we've put it right on the homepage. You can click one button, put in and then we give some instructions, and you can put your name and your street address and your zip code, and it'll show you exactly who your state senator and who your state representative are. And so I'll just tell you real quickly a couple of the issues. We do anticipate tomorrow, a gambling bill will drop tomorrow. They've just come through a special session, and they've been waiting to do it because qualifying to run against them ended on Friday. So now they can drop all their bills on Tuesday. And so I know Senator Al Britton out of South Alabama, he's going to drop a gambling bill tomorrow, so that fight's going to be back on, of course. There's one we're dealing with as well for looking at. We're not sure how it's going to land yet, but you know, last year they passed now that alcohol sales could be delivered directly to the home. And man, that's bad for kids, all right? When dad or mom can have alcohol delivered to the home, they don't even have to leave and go get it. That's bad for the family. Well, now they're dealing with one, maybe drive-through alcohol. You'll be able to drive through maybe even possibly fast food restaurants and things like that, restaurants where you can pick up your food. That's another one that we're monitoring very closely. Of course, there's a VCAP bill that Senator Shelnut out of this area out of the Birmingham area has sponsored that would make it illegal for children under 18 to undergo any sex change operations or hormone blockers and things like that under 18. Those are permanent decisions that shouldn't be made till someone's an adult. So that's a bill that we feel like is really pro-family, pro-child, that we're working on really hard as well. And then, of course, you know, last year they passed a medical marijuana bill. I hate to even say medical. There's really nothing medical about it. It's just a guise it's just one step closer to legalizing recreational marijuana. And we're going to have marijuana dispensaries, or you could call them pot shops. Those are coming. I'm just telling you, unless something changes, they're coming to your neighborhood. We were with some ethics leaders in Oklahoma a few weeks ago up in Nashville. They're a couple of years ahead of us on this issue. And they've got now more marijuana dispensaries in Oklahoma than they do churches. And that's what's coming. And so if you were to look at that, and then you were to look at having a lottery and gambling, that's all you're going to see if it goes that direction. So if any of those issues ring a bell with you, I would encourage you to call your legislator or your state senator or your representative and let them know. I brought a couple of things out front for you. Latest newsletter is out at the table out front. Also just an overview of ALCAP and American Character Builders. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. Dr. Joe Godfrey's got a great series, The Forgotten Command. If you've never seen that, pick up the brochure. And there's a video series of it on the website. And then also I'll tell you, if you want to keep up day to day, in and out with what's going on, and we do a lot of other stuff as well. Listen to our live radio show every day between 3 and 5 p.m. on 101.1 FM. We're live. You can call in. You can listen. We're talking to a lot of the people that are involved in all of these issues, both nationally and locally. And so I put a little handout out there for that as well, so you can listen in to the live radio show. We're available to come to your church and be with you. In fact, I'm preaching for Mike Wallace here in a couple of weeks. Be down in Montgomery at a church, preaching at a church next Sunday morning. So you know, we're available to get out to your church and be with you guys. And look, I'm real excited that Joi's here today. Been with First Priority for 25 years, working in and out of the schools for all of those years, our public schools, and trying to bring Christ to the schools and bring something positive. Joi and what she does and other iterations of what she does over the years, we worked very closely with. We've always felt like it was important. Any way the church can get their foot in the door, get their hand in the door into the public school, whether it's First Priority or something like this, or FCA or whatever it may be, that's something we ought to be taking advantage of. And so Joi has an incredible opportunity. It really works hand in glove with American Character Builders as we relaunch it, going into the schools, into the classroom, and teaching all the kids in the school, basically. I mean, that opportunity's there to be in front of all the kids in the schools on a consistent basis, teaching them how to make decisions and choices for life. And American Character Builders, we're sort of covering the tobacco, alcohol, drug angle of it, bullying, but what they do and their curriculum over on the side of sexual purity and helping kids understand that all is incredible. I had a guy on my staff that worked with them. We made him, well, I've had two people that's done it actually and did it a lot for them, went into the schools and taught. And so it is really important. So I'm excited to hear an update from Joi today. She does a great job. and got a great ministry. We should really look at partnering with her. You should in your community as much as you possibly can. And so Joi, come on up, and I guess you're next, and give us this overview. And I'll be here if any of you guys want to talk afterwards about anything more specific. I would love to do that. Thank y'all so much. It's good to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I'm not going to cover up the BMBA logo because it's so beautiful. I thought it was etched in glass. I'm like, is that etched in glass? It's so pretty. But I'm going to put this right here. Every time I move, is that going to do that? They told me I had to wear a microphone because I can't just stand behind a podium. I used to teach high school for many, many years, and I have a little bit of a not sore throat, but scratchy throat, so I'm going to keep my water there. And my kids used to say, Miss Wasill, if we put you on the podium next to or the stool next to your podium and tied your hands behind your back, you couldn't say a word because I couldn't move and I couldn't. And some pastors are like that, right? Yeah, you got to move. First of all, I want to thank Greg and thank John for their introductions. And I knew Greg, but just through phone calls, and didn't know him in person until the beginning of this year. And DCO was blessed, Decisions, Choices, and Options was blessed by Michael and Chris and Marisa and the wonderful staff here at BMBA by inviting us to have an Alabama office, something that we've needed for many, many years. We started partnering with pregnancy resource centers for teaching our programs in the schools of Alabama back in 2009. And so we've had a presence with our programs in the schools of Alabama for, going on 13 years now. And we just needed a place to live here. And so I grew up in the Shoals area. Just a little background on me. I grew up in Muscle Shoals and then went to high school at Brooks, which is just right outside from Florence, and then went off to college. And don't be mad at me because I went to Ole Miss. I went there because I fell in love with the campus, nothing else. Oh, well, they had my degree in liberal arts and business, and I wanted a business degree in public administration, go figure. Because I was going to law school. That was my plan. That wasn't God's. But I graduated from Ole Miss and moved to Nashville, met my husband, got married, and then I lived there for 35 years. And the ministry that God called me to, my plan was to go back to teaching once my son, who was 2 at the time I started DCO, once he went to kindergarten. My plan was to go back into my old classroom and teach marketing and business and finance. And that was not God's plan because my best friend's daughter at church at First Baptist Hendersonville, Tennessee, got pregnant at 15. And I walked through that pregnancy with that young woman and realized that she doesn't get truth, she doesn't get hope, she doesn't get anything inside the walls of a classroom. Because those are some of the most uneducated people when it comes to what the choices look like and what her life is going to look like. They don't know any better than she does, so why are they even opening their mouth to talk to her about this? And so she did go to our youth pastor, our student pastor at our church, and that was how she told her mom and stepdad, was they came over to his house. And he helped her tell them. And so walking through that and getting that eye-opening experience, and I remember sitting down with my principal that had been my principal at Hendersonville High School, my boss, and I said, I didn't have any pregnant girls when I was teaching all those years I taught. And he said, yes, you did. I said, really? I did. I remember one. I remember a girl named Beth. She was pregnant. I don't remember. He said, Joi, this was the 90s. They all had abortions. I was like, that just crushed me. And so then I knew. I didn't know I never knew it would go any further than Sumner County, Tennessee. I certainly never envisioned it going into 13 counties of Tennessee and 9 going on 10 of Alabama. And so I'm so excited about the potential to partner with Greg and ALCAT with their American Character Builders Education Program because, and I did have an experience last year with the legislature because we officially moved to Hartselle. I got my Tennessee born and raised husband out of Tennessee. I never thought that would happen. It was always my dream to come back to Sweet Home, Alabama. My parents live here. My dad was a pastor in North Alabama for many, many years, and all of my relatives, immediate and long-term relatives, live in Alabama. I have no relatives in Tennessee. So, and now my son, and Jacob moved here, and guess what happened? Mommy and Daddy followed him, and he's like, oh my gosh, y'all are moving to Alabama because I'm going to school in Tuscaloosa. And I'm like, no, honey, we're moving because it's always been Mommy's dream to come back home. And my parents are aging, so we bought a house in Hartselle. So I keep I-65 between this exit down here and the, what exit is it in Hendersonville? 97, exit 97 to get off to go to my Nashville office because we have an office. Our home office is based out of Hendersonville, Tennessee. And you're going to see my former pastor. He's going to tell you a little bit about what our church in Hendersonville, or my former church, we're members of West Hartselle Baptist Church in Hartselle. I wanted this up here because this is who we are. And you know our name, but this is why we do what we do. And these doors are symbolic because we have the entree through the doors of the public school, private school, home school, and community organizations where we serve. We get to go into the schools and teach during instructional hours during the day. And as only God could figure this out and make it happen. And we teach them truth, motivation, and success. Those are the things we want them to hear. And so as only God could work out, and I could never have made this happen, only He could, when I started creating these programs back in 2002, at that time I didn't know where I was going to teach them. I didn't know who was going to let me in, if it was going to be psychology teachers or who. And now our programs in our high school, we have 4 levels of programs. You're going to see a little bit of them in just a minute. But our high school programs are taught in required to graduate classes. You have to have health to graduate. That's where we teach our 9th and 10th grade class. You have to have economics to graduate. That's where we teach our cost of parenting class. And so all of the kids in the high school are going to hear the material before we leave. And I want to read you our Bible verse that is the DCO, this is 2022's guiding light, if you will. Every year our staff sits down at a retreat. We just had 2 weeks ago, and we choose what we believe God's calling us to focus on this year. And it's strange, but this morning when I was pulling it up on my phone, I don't know if my Bible says this, but above the chapter in Isaiah, it's Isaiah 30. Above the chapter it says, "Woe to the obstinate nation." Ooh. Our verse for this year is Isaiah 30:21. And he says, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" That's what we desire, because right now, the culture that we're in, I think you would agree, this is the most dangerous culture that our kids have ever grown up in. What is your concern right now for youth, for students? Just name one thing. Just say one thing that you're concerned about. Pardon? I heard someone. Marijuana, okay.
Gender issues.
Gender issues. That's my number one. What else?
Physical violence.
Physical violence, yes. Okay. When I first started this ministry, it was all about the prevention of teen pregnancy, because in the late 90s, teen pregnancy was out the roof. And like I said, it was my best friend's daughter who became pregnant, and I wanted to be able to provide, as an educator, information to the students so that they would understand what the impact of their choices really are, because they don't know. She was talked out of choosing adoption. She already had met the couple, and it was going to be an open adoption. They had a wonderful relationship, and every day at her school, here's what she heard. "You're going to give your baby away? How could you do that? Nobody does that. You don't love your baby? Why would you give it away? That child's going to grow up to hate you." She heard that every day by her peers and some of her teachers. So guess what happened when she got close to delivery? She was tired of hearing it. And she said to me one day, she said, "Joy, I'm not a bad person." I said, "Honey, nobody thinks you're a bad person. You're making one of the most self-sacrificing decisions a human can ever be called to make." And she said, "No, everybody thinks I'm a horrible person." And that's what I have learned over 20 years of this ministry, that everybody thinks of birth mothers. They think they're drug addicts. They think they're poverty-stricken. And the most horrific thing they think about a woman who chooses adoption is she doesn't love or want her baby. And over the 20 years, I have met hundreds of birth mothers, and I've never met one that was a drug addict or that didn't love her baby. They're making the highest form of sacrificial, loving decision that a human on this planet can ever be called to make. So we're gonna, I'm very excited to be here. My dad wanted to come with me, but I'm gonna share with y'all some stuff that I really don't want my 84-year-old daddy to know about. So I said, "Daddy, maybe you can go next time. When I'm not speaking, I'll bring you to another one." But I am so excited to be here, and we're just super excited about being a part of BMBA, because this is a wonderful organization, and thank you, Chris, and everybody. I'm gonna show a really brief clip. It's about 5 to 6 minutes long, and it'll give you a clip, it'll give you an idea of what it is that we do. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, there it is.
Welcome to the site where the ministry of DCO began. On a beautiful September day in 2002, I walked in the doors of this very familiar place, not as a staff member, to begin my day teaching juniors and seniors, as I had done for many years prior, but as a guest speaker. I remember being very nervous. The material that I would be covering on that day was a bold new lesson for the students and a bold new adventure for me. Come on, let's go inside. This is my old classroom. On that day in 2002, it was the birthplace of DCO, a ministry that would grow and expand to educate not only students at this high school, but schools all over Tennessee and Alabama, and many other states. I'm afraid to admit, though, that if I'd known then what would take place over the next 2 decades, I might have bolted right out of this building. But a burden had been placed on my heart for the youth of our city to know and understand the impact of their choices on their lives far into adulthood. The reality of teen pregnancy was the focus of those early classroom programs, allowing students to see into the life of a teen girl or guy going through the decisions that have to be made when an unplanned pregnancy occurs, gave students true understanding about the reality of sexual choices. As a high school teacher, I knew that teens often live in a fantasy world where that will never happen to me. But what if it does? Truth, not fantasy, must guide them. I learned a lot in that first year about how little teens and even adults know about these options. Being a teacher, I researched, studied, and created content that would engage and equip these young people to make choices that result in true health, successful futures, and healthy relationships. Now, in 2021, we provide a 4-tiered program beginning in middle school, going through senior year of high school, and we just published a new online curriculum for parents who desire a biblically aligned sex education program for their children to participate in at home. DCO has risen to the challenge to provide educational programs based on truth, science, and optimal health for youth ages 11 to 19, and we will continue to combat the dangerous indoctrination that seeks to destroy our children. I would never have imagined that current challenge 20 years ago standing right here in this classroom. Teenagers face serious, even daunting things in 2002, but the challenges facing Gen Z, this generation of youth, not only involve unplanned pregnancy, but the intentional re-engineering of biology, sexuality, and family relationships. The core of our human existence since the beginning of time is now in question.
The difference between DCO and other organizations that we're the only program that educates teens on the 3 hard choices facing an unplanned pregnancy: parenting, abortion, and adoption. No other organization, at the extent that DCO does, educates teens on those physical and emotional consequences that come with sexual behavior before marriage. Students spend an average of 8 hours a day on their social media platforms, which is correlating to higher suicide rates than ever before. Our program helps equip them with tools and resources to help build their self-esteem and protect them against the dangers of social media like sexting, pornography, and sexual predators. Students today are more confused and misguided than ever before because we're failing to speak truth to them. Even the question we have on our survey, "Are you male or female?" can get adverse reactions. We even had a student in this school literally tell me that just because someone is pregnant doesn't mean that they identify as a female. I wish you could see the students' faces when I explain what a medically accurate first trimester abortion looks like. I see girls crying, faces turning white. Sometimes they have to put their hands on their ears because the information is just too hard. But the truth is, when we speak about what an abortion is, they change their minds. One of the most effective things that DCO does is educate on the beauty of adoption. We talk about the process of adoption, positive adoption language, and how an adoption works. After we present, a 60% swing in favorability toward adoption occurs. I will be honest, over the last 11 years, my job has become increasingly more challenging. Students are more confrontational and misguided than ever before on issues like marriage and gender. We, as parents in the church, have failed to truly educate students on the value of biblical marriage, the sanctity of life, and the value of self. Facts are still facts, and even though we can't go into a classroom and outright talk about biblical foundation, statistics and data back up those principles. And when we speak truth, we speak God's truth.
I began asking every parent of preteens and teens that I knew a question. If you could press play on a resource that would break down a biblical worldview of gender, relationships, dating, marriage, and sex. Would you use it? The responses were not just yes, but where can I get it? And when can I get it? Some parents actually asked more specific questions. Will this program address self-worth, social media, sexting, and pornography? Because of these responses, when you visit the DCO website, you will find a brand new online resource called Life Choices. DCO is no longer just in the classroom. Why? Because as Christians, we know that every person is made in the image of God, and therefore every child, whether public, private, or parent school, is precious in the sight of God. Every single preteen and teenager deserves to know God's design for relationships and sex and for the abundant life that is available to them. I pray that your eyes, minds, and hearts have been opened to the very serious place our youth now find themselves. We as parents, grandparents, communities, churches, and staff at DCO have been on the front lines of this battle for many years, but the dangers of losing ground have never been more serious than now. Everything we do, everything we stand for is now subject to the cancel culture. But be certain of this, DCO will continue to speak truth in direct opposition to the voices spewing lies at our kids 24/7, even if it costs us everything.
Okay, this is our goal. We want to see that our kids understand, even if we can't, just like in the book of Esther, speak, there's no reference scripturally to God, and the literal Jewish nation was rescued by Esther and Mordecai working together. Just like we cannot speak scripture and quote Bible verses in the public school, we're teaching God's truth, like Beth said in the video, because science is aligned with God's truth because God created science. So choosing to be sexually abstinent gives you a healthier, beneficial life than not choosing to be sexually abstinent. And that goes along with God's truth. So we just want them to see God's design and then let that change the way they view themselves so that therefore their decisions that they make are changed. They're not just buying the cultural line. And so at this point I want to have two of our Alabama educators are with us today, and I want to introduce them to you so you can see the people who are taking our programs into the schools of Greater Birmingham. And so first is Laura Jones. Laura back there in the back. She's been in this office several times helping me here in the office, and she is teaching in the Shelby and Birmingham area schools with Beth Pruitt, who you're going to meet in just a second. And then Sharon Jennings is over in Pell City, and she covers St. Clair County. And they both work with, Laura works with Vestavia Save a Life, Sharon works with Ann's New Hope, and then we also work with the formerly known as North Jefferson Women's Center, but is now partnered and under the same umbrella with Vestavia. And we had a huge middle school program going up there. As Greg referenced just a minute ago, a couple of his guys worked for us, but I want to talk about that later. So Sharon Jennings, and then Beth Pruitt, you see her on the screen. She is at Hoover High School right now today. She would have been here, but she is teaching our programs at Hoover High School, and I would so love for us to charter a bus and hop over there so you could watch it live. I love for people to see the program live and in person, because my pastor came when he first came to Hendersonville First Baptist in '09, and he was standing around talking. He waited till all the kids got out there, and he said, well, first of all, I couldn't be a teacher because I thumped several of them on the head, and second of all, he said, I could have put a Bible verse with every slide you had up there. And I said, I know, isn't that cool? God did that? So he was kind of shocked. So now, what do we teach? Well, I think you've heard a little bit about what it is that we teach, but sexual risk avoidance. Do you know what that means? Sexual risk avoidance. Translate that into a word that you do know what it means. Abstinence, yes. But abstinence got a dirty word. It became a dirty word. It got a dirty name years ago because Planned Parenthood was doing all these undercover sting operations of crisis pregnancy centers, who were the primary deliverers of abstinence education. And we spend about $1,200 to $1,600 getting our staff, whether they come from your church as a partner or a pregnancy center as a partner. We do not allow anyone to walk into the school because it's a sacred trust they've given us. They're giving us classroom teaching time, y'all. And so we make sure they're expertly trained by the people at the National Abstinence Education level and by us on the programs. They're not going rogue. They are not allowed to go rogue in the classroom. I had a girl right here in Birmingham that I got a call, and I had to come all the way down from Nashville and explain to her why she couldn't teach what she was teaching the way she was teaching it, because it was very shaming and harmful to the students. So we teach sexual risk avoidance education, formerly known as absence education, during the instructional day. So those videos you saw, I'm having a wreck with these microphones. I told y'all I don't like them.
Joy, take the mic and bend it down. It doesn't need to be in front of your mouth.
This one?
That's good.
Is that good? Okay, maybe that'll stop. We teach in classrooms with 30 kids, 15 kids, or in an auditorium with 150. And we're there usually all day. Beth will be at Hoover High School from 7:15 this morning until 2:30 this afternoon. So we're there the entire school day. And all of our high school programs, as I said to you earlier, are in required classes to graduate. And so I want to just flip through some of the slides. This is our Healthy Boundaries Middle School program. And we obviously, middle school is where you have to start. We did not start there in the beginning of our ministry, but we added it because the high school teachers were saying, look, I got 9th graders coming into my class. They're already sexually active. Some of them have already had abortions. Y'all better get your program down in middle school. So about 10 years ago, we created the middle school program. And this is the one that's missing from Alabama, y'all. We cannot allow this to go this way, because the Jameses out in North Fulton did a great job. And then after COVID came back, I don't know, but when pregnancy centers and our relationships with pregnancy centers have been awesome and amazing, but generally most of them are not the size of Vestavia or North Jefferson. They're more like an executive director and an ultrasound and then all the volunteers. And so they don't have the people to do this. And so what we envision having an office here and having relationships is that we run the Alabama DCO program the way we run it in Tennessee. They work for us. We train them. We hire them. These pregnancy center directors are just underwater with the work they have to do. So we're going to take that off their plate. We're going to hire them, and then we're going to pay them so that now their budget is freed up to do other things. And because it's usually the first position a pregnancy center cuts is the sexual risk avoidance education program. And that's prevention education. We don't do rescue ministry education. We do prevention education. We want them to prevent this. So here's just a glimpse of some of them. Now you're going to see up in the corner a Bible verse, because we pulled these slides for this program that we're doing today from our Christian school program. And like Brother Bruce, my former pastor, said, I could have put a Bible verse on every one of them. I was like, well, we do have that. It's just our Christian school program. But in our public school, that's missing. We do not have Bible verses in our public school program. But it's the same content. We want them to understand that their decisions do determine their destiny. And the most important decision any human can ever make is their eternal destiny decision, right? They need to, and we can't teach that in public school, but the decisions they make need to come from a point of understanding that you're going to have impact down into the future. And then we also want them to think about, what impacts their decisions. Does culture? Oh my goodness, it's literally taking our kids under. Culture is taking them down. And Greg and I were talking about this in the hall. We've got to do what Planned Parenthood and the people who are pushing all of the radical agenda stuff do. He talked to a guy yesterday, or whenever you were in Montgomery last, and said, he handed me his business card and it said, State Director of Planned Parenthood. Okay, these people have learned that they need to appear and change their game plan. And so they're collaborating and working, and we don't collaborate as well. We kind of get off in our silos. Well, this is my gig, this is what I do, and this is my gig, this is what I do. And we don't go marching in together to the state capitol. And I spent some time working last year with Alabama legislators. And I'm just going to say, I don't like the Good Old Boy Network. I knew all the good old boys in Tennessee, and I could call them and say, William, hello, what are you doing on that boat? I don't know anybody here. But we were trying to put some teeth in the sex ed program. Sharon was helping with this, very involved with it. We had all the pregnancy centers that work with us together. We were trying to put teeth into the absence education bill, and it went the opposite way, and it basically opened up the doors for Planned Parenthood to get in. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I didn't revamp that decision this year because I'm like, I got to step back and think about this. We got to have a better game plan, and I think Greg and I can come up with a game plan on this. I didn't know Greg was in, I don't think you were in your position last year at Alcott at this time. So the decisions that impact people basically are the culture, the people around them, social media, self-worth. Are you concerned about the content that kids are getting from TikTok and Instagram and all the social media and the games? Are you concerned about that? Do you think it's literally rewiring their brains? Is it having any positive impact on their life at all? No. Even Instagram admitted that. They said they knew that their content was causing girls to have deep depression. So we also talk about the dangers of bullying and the media that they're accessing. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Hendersonville at my office. One time I was at the hairdresser's getting my hair cut and colored, and this mom was just sitting there. I didn't know her, and she just started talking to me. She asked me what I did, and I told her, and she started crying right there in the hairdresser's office. She said, I have an 8th grade daughter. I just had to move her in January from last semester to this semester to another school because she was so cyberbullied on her social media by girls, and she was so body shamed that she believed the lie that the LGBTQ community is telling, is that you can just change your gender. So this 8th grade girl from White House, Tennessee now wants to be a boy. She didn't want a girl's body anymore. And then I had the same conversation with another woman who is also the mother of an 8th grade girl. Y'all, and that just breaks my heart that we have no middle school program going down here in the schools. And so they're falling into the trap, and the LGBTQ agenda knows that. They're very welcoming, they're very inclusive, and they're the people that will accept. Even my own pastor, the next one I'm going to talk about is pornography, but it really goes with the story of cyberbullying. My own pastor in Hartselle shared with me, he said he talked to a student from our church, and she's not bisexual, but she tells people at school she's bisexual because she won't fit in Hartselle, Alabama. We're not talking about New York City. So we have to teach pornography to middle school children because the middle school teachers, where we were teaching our program, said you have to add this subject because they're all engaged in it. And from Greg Oliver upstairs with Awaken Ministries, he and I are going to work together on something for our next online curriculum that's going to say, parents, here's what pornography does to your child's brain. And it literally rewires it. He told me one day, we were standing out in the hall here, that the way you have to treat someone who has been on pornography from age, say, 19 to 30 is completely different than the way you treat someone who's been addicted from age 7 to 20. And that's what they're seeing. Because kids are getting addicted at younger and younger ages because of their access. So we had to add pornography into the middle school program and touch on the impact of that. We also had to add this because the teacher said if you don't talk about sexting, they don't know what it is. They don't know that when somebody sends them a nude of a classmate and then they forward it on, that they've just committed a felony. They do not know that. And so these middle school kids all over Tennessee and all the other states are getting pulled into the principal's office, and then the police officer shows up, and then mommy and daddy have to go to court. And they may get a felony. And that would be 25 years on their record because it's trafficking child pornography. And they're simply sending a nude. So we talk about sexting, and we talk about the impact that it has. And a lot of them are using it as blackmail. If they've got a nude of a girl, they're using it for all kinds of nefarious reasons. So basically what we want the middle school kids to hear is that when you have an issue that comes your way, you are not equipped to handle that on your own. You've got to go to a trusted adult. If it's your first priority person that meets with you in the morning, go to them. If it's a teacher that you trust, go to them. Go to your parents. I hope your parents, but in many cases that's not who they trust. And then also we want them to be able to have filters and accountability. That's what that whole boundaries program is about, is putting boundaries around their mind, their heart, and their body. And then we move into the high school program, and this is our 9th grade, 10th grade in Alabama health class, and you notice the Bible verse again when we're teaching in public school, it does not show up. We go into a much higher level discussion with these 9th and 10th graders, and we talk about, what are the benefits of abstinence? It's more than just the health benefit of you're not going to have an STD, you're not going to have an unplanned pregnancy. It is you're going to have freedom to be a teenager. You're not going to be saddled. As I saw from my experience, and we talked about it in the teacher's lounge, and teachers do that, y'all. It's a real thing. We talk in the teacher's lounge. And we know the good kids from the bad kids because everybody's like, you got so-and-so in 5th period? Well, good luck with that. But we talk in the teacher's lounge, and because you can tell when kids have gotten physically involved, they act different. And then their whole high school years go into this train wreck many times of relations and emotions and all of that. And so we want them to be free of that. We also want them to be able to be free to accomplish their life goals. They've got goals. They want to go to college. They want to have a good career when they get out. And so some of these decisions to be sexually active could lead into some decisions that impact that. So we talk about the consequences of the choices they're making and how to make good choices, how to avoid them. And so we don't want the story of, you know, what Lisa and Laura and all the people that work, and Sharon work at all the pregnancy centers, they deal with the trauma and what's going on. They deal with the post-abortion trauma. They deal with the trauma of a 13-year-old that's pregnant up to a 40-year-old that's pregnant and doesn't want to be. So we want them to understand you need the freedom to make good choices so you can be free of that. And so next is one of the slides. We talk about the 3 options, and we're the only sexual risk avoidance education program in the country that does this. Because you can't stand up there and talk to them about sexual risk avoidance if you don't tell them, well, this is one of the reasons why you need to avoid it. That's just not good education. And so unfortunately, the outcome for girls, and this is for high school and middle school age girls, not for moms that are out of school, the impact on teenagers when it comes to the issue of choosing to parent is economically and educationally devastating. You can see the national statistics on there. Very few of them have a college degree by age 30. Very few. And only 4 out of 10 teen girls graduate from high school if they choose parenting as a single teen mom. And then 78%, there's a billboard, I pass it almost every other day, it seems like, going up and down I-65, right after you cross the Tennessee line, and it's the AFA, American Family Association. It says, marriage prevents poverty of children at a rate of 80%. That's pretty powerful. And so we talk about the number 1 chosen option is parenting. We talk about fetal growth and development. If she's pregnant, if your friend tells you at lunch today she's pregnant, what does she need to know? She has a growing baby inside of her. It is a human. And we go through life begins at conception, all that stuff you see on the board, and we show them. We use 4D ultrasound. When they leave our program, they've seen a baby inside the womb sucking its thumb. They've seen it kicking and moving, and they know it's a human. And so when Beth, who's at Hoover today, begins the process of describing abortion, they've already heard this part. So they know. And it's true. Anytime I take somebody to see a program, this is pre-COVID, of course, if I were to take Chris in to see a program at Hoover, I would position him so he's sitting so that he can see some of the kids' faces, because I want you to see their reaction when they talk about abortion. And we don't graphically show any pictures. I would never do that. You get kicked out of a school. We just describe. We use our fists. This is the uterus. And that's basically all we do, is we just describe how it's done. And then we talk about, sadly, abortion. And maybe with the Dobbs case, who knows, in fall of 2022, when we go back to school, maybe this option will be removed from Alabama and Tennessee public school programs because it's no longer an option. If the Dobbs case, and I know y'all are all praying about that, but right now it's the number 2 chosen option. Between 25 and 35% of women of any age choose abortion. And so we go through and talk about how a first trimester abortion is performed. And I've had kids pass out. I've had kids have to get up and leave. It's rough. It's really rough. And then we talk about the number 3 chosen, sadly, is adoption. And you know, kids that weren't even on the planet in the 1950s and 60s think adoption looked like it did back then. They think somebody snatches the baby away from them and runs out of the delivery room, and they never see the child again, and they never know what happened to their baby. Okay, nothing could be further from the truth. That's what they told my friend's daughter when she was pregnant. You're never going to see that child again. Okay, yes, she was. She was going to have an open adoption. She was going to be at the birthday party. And so we want them to understand that birth mothers and children of adoption have good health and good livelihoods, and the relationship is very sweet and special, and it's such a picture of what Christ, you know, through Christ we're adopted into God's family. It's such a spiritual thing that we should be teaching and promoting. And not only that, but they're going to have a married mom and dad. They're going to have a stable home. These people have been checked out, top to bottom. They know everything about you before you can adopt a child. And they're also going to likely be placed in a Christian home, because that's generally where adoptions are done. So it's a win-win. And as Beth said in the video, we do see a huge increase. The students go from thinking adoption is awful to thinking it's fabulous. I would choose adoption. I may choose to adopt someday. The last place that we end is the first place we begin in every one of our programs. It's called the Success Sequence. The Brookings Institute created this several years ago, and they found after years and years of research, if teenagers will do those 3 things you see on the board in order, I shared this with the governor of Tennessee, if they will graduate from high school, and then once they've graduated, they complete their education, whatever that is, whether it's trade school, college, whatever, and then they begin a full-time career working, full-time, and they get married and have children in that order, married then children, after the age of 21. They only have a 3 to 9% chance of living in poverty. Every one of us, from school to home to church, every one of us should be telling kids this, because this changes their lives. So who do you think is the greatest threat to our kids? Who do you think it is?
Culture.
Media.
Culture and media kind of go together. I think it's apathy. I think it's apathy. Parents aren't talking to their kids about sex because they're afraid they don't know what to say about, well, my best friend has just come out as transgender, and I love my best friend, and now you're just a bigot and all that. Parents aren't talking to kids. We talk to a whole lot of student pastors. Student pastors aren't talking to kids. They're scared they're going to lose their job. Guess who is talking to them? The people like Miley Cyrus, who has 2 million followers on her Instagram, and this is the image that she's promoting. Abortion is health care. It's so good. It's just so sweet, just like a cake. Lick the icing. And they have such high levels of these people speaking into them. And then we have the Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services promoting the most unhealthy person, the most unhealthy thing. And last year, the VCAP bill, and we had one in Tennessee, and my good friend, who is the Deputy Speaker of the Tennessee Senate, her bill was the same as the one here. And they pulled her off the floor of the Senate and said, and it was my senator, a Church of Christ, godly man, I thought, and maybe he is, I don't know, maybe he's just I don't know what's going on with him. But pulled her off the floor and took her back into the room with the white coats from Vanderbilt. And they said, we're going to move it from 18 down to 12. That, after 12, they can do it, but 12 and under, they can't. And Janice is a little spitball. She was on the school board. She's a fiery little woman. And she said, no, you're not. No, you're not. And they were like, yeah, I'm going to put Farrell, my senator, said, I'm going to put an amendment on it. And she said, no, you're not, because I'm pulling my bill. She marched right out of the room, went to the speaker and said, pull the bill, because you can't amend a bill that's not in existence. So she pulled it. So she's starting back with the same bill again this year. So this guy is now promoted to Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services. So kids say, oh, well, it must be okay, because he's transgender, so what's wrong with that? And then this is what they're facing in just about every school district. Last week, I was on a phone call with the Tennessee Department of Health, and I've known this was coming for 2 years, and here's where we are now. Because comprehensive sex ed, I've got a copy of the program that's taught through Planned Parenthood and through the Alabama Department of Health here in this state. And if you want to have your eyes opened wide, come up and look at this afterwards, because I had a very interesting conversation with a state representative from here in Birmingham last year when we were trying to do that work, because he said, Planned Parenthood's not in the schools of Alabama. And I said, well, they may not physically be walking into the schools, but they're the #1 producer of comprehensive sex ed materials, and this is what's on the Alabama Department of Public Health's website is being taught in Tuscaloosa, Walker, and Greene counties. So in those counties, yes, sir, it is, because this is it. So if you want to see it, I'll be happy to show it to you. But this is a survey that kids are being given all the time. They get to choose from all these gender things. And we do a pre and post survey on every class we teach. And we ask the question, sex, male, female. And a lot of times they'll write out beside it, other, non-binary, whatever they want to write. Well, this is the one the state of Tennessee Department of Health is going to require we start doing. They didn't give us a date. We're out. We're out. We've been funded by them since 2016 to teach absence education. We're now going to be walking away from $100,000. So now I get to go back tomorrow and figure out how I'm going to make up that $100,000, because we got 7 counties of Tennessee that's covered by that grant. So this is where they are. And I know that you have, I forgot about this. Listen to John.
A group of thousands of parents, actually, that had all gone to their school board meetings, had all walked in with these books that they had found in the school libraries or that teachers had put on the desk. And when you look at the narratives and you look at the images that are in the books, and then you go look up the Tennessee state statutes as to what is considered illegal to put in front of a child. It's obscene material. You can't do that. And so I went to the governor's office. I went to the Commissioner of Education in Tennessee, and I sat them down. I said, look at these pictures and read these stories. And I said, Governor, tell me what would happen if your grandkid came over to my house and I showed him these pictures and read him this story. What could you do to me, Governor, at that point? He said, I could have you arrested. I went, that's exactly right. And this is going on in our schools all throughout our state. It's going on in our schools all around this country. But to his credit.
Okay, I showed you that because when someone like John Rich, who's sitting there with his whiskey bottles, and I don't know what the label of his whiskey is, I couldn't read it, but you know, that's not exactly the image we would promote. When somebody like him is fighting mad that he goes and gets a meeting with the governor and the commissioner of education, things are bad, people. It's bad. So we better be standing up too. And I know you've seen this from Barna, right? 4% of Gen Z has a biblical worldview. I want you to listen to why. This is Emma. She's a college student, and she does not name her university, but it's Lipscomb University. So listen to Emma.
My name is Emma Allender. I am a junior here in Nashville at a private Christian university. Probably the thing that surprised me the most about attending a private Christian college is that somehow it's still taboo to be a Bible-believing Christian. So basically, I've been in a lot of different settings with a lot of different friends and teachers where when I bring up scripture or when we try to talk about the Bible or what we believe, somehow it's still not considered politically correct. And so sometimes we're not allowed to talk about homosexuality or about abortion or things like that because they're too risky and too touchy, so we're not even allowed to talk about why we believe what we believe, even at a Christian university. If a student doesn't have a strong understanding of why they believe what they believe, when they get put into challenging situations, especially in universities and with new peer groups that they're going to meet, when they go throughout their life, they're going to be challenged all the time. Because if they don't know why they believe what they believe, the world's going to present their view of things, and they're going to present it in a wonderful, loving sort of way that they truly care about people. But if you know what the Bible actually says and about how we are supposed to truly love people, you're going to see that what they're saying is false. But if you don't have that understanding, then you won't see the difference between the two.
So what can we do? What can we do? Well, as I mentioned earlier, and Greg mentioned in his time up here, you can partner with us. You can walk into the schools with us. Now, you physically may not walk into that school. I had a Brentwood student pastor say, you know, we can't get into the schools of Brentwood, Tennessee, but y'all are in there during the day teaching what we would teach if we could go in. So our job is to come alongside you and partner with you and make sure that Brentwood and Williamson County schools are funded to the level that you guys can serve every school in our community. And so that's one way of doing it, is to participate with us financially. Most of the churches that we partner with are missions outreach budget. Many of them give monthly. We have 2 churches in Tennessee, my home church, that sponsors. They're extremely generous, and then a couple of others that are extremely generous. And then the average church donation is probably going to be like $1,000 or $2,000 a year, or maybe they'll give us $100 a month or $500 a month, whatever works for their budget. But that's one way to do it. Or maybe you could do like what Greg talked about, and you could share your student pastor with us, but you're going to let me train him. You're going to let him go through. We're going to spend $1,200 to $1,600 on his or her training, because we're going to make sure that when they walk into that classroom, they're able to handle the kid that's sitting in the back of the room Googling something from Planned Parenthood and screams out something that is totally contrary to what they said. So we're going to train them. And now, very quickly, in the essence of time, I'm going to kind of wrap this up. This is my pastor from First Baptist Hendersonville, my former pastor.
Our church supports this ministry through our missions budget, but my wife and I personally support this ministry too, because it's an organization and a ministry that we believe in. Young people today, probably more than any time in history, have voices coming at them in warp speed. They are hearing things from the internet, from music, from friends, from television, from movies, and very little of what they hear is of a biblical foundation or anything similar to a Christian worldview. So I want to encourage you to prayerfully consider getting involved in praying for, in giving to, and in speaking words of encouragement for DCO.
So here's what it looks like for Alabama. Pre-COVID, we served 4,000 to 4,200 students right here in the greater Birmingham area through primarily our partnership with Vestavia Pregnancy Resource Center, and Beth Pruitt, who came from Shelby, Save a Life, and then when they cut their program at Shelby, they didn't have any money to teach it down there anymore. She was covering every high school in Shelby County, in addition to Birmingham. So Lisa Hogan brought her over to Vestavia and continued to pay her to teach in Shelby County schools, even though that's not their service area. So pre-COVID, we were at 4,000, 4,200 students in greater Birmingham, and then in the total state of Alabama, we were serving a little over 6,000. And so the cost, we've taken our budget and we pull out all the frills, well, not frills, you have to do it, the fundraising and the marketing and any of the things that are not directly related to program expense of getting our teachers into the school. And we don't pay these people a lot of money. They don't make as much as a first-year college student, a first-year teacher that just graduated from college in a public school. So we're not paying them astronomically, but we do pay their mileage to and from the schools. That's what it costs, is $30 per student. And so if we're talking about serving the greater Birmingham area, that's 4,000 times 30 is $120,000 to get the middle school back funded where it needs to have people in the middle schools. And right now we only have Laura and Beth serving in Birmingham, and that's not even all the high schools. They're not doing all of them. And so, because they can't, they're doing other things. And then to serve the whole entire state at 6,000, that would be times 30 is $180,000. So we're looking for businesses. I have a business that gives us $25,000 every year in Tennessee. So we're looking for business partners too. But my heart as a believer is that the church would be sponsoring this at a higher level than the corporate community. And do you know why corporate community sponsors us? Because the quality of the students coming out of high school are going to be their employees. And a child that has learned sexual risk avoidance, which is impulse control, which is self-control, which is self-regulation, is a much better employee. And they don't have all of the trappings and things that go along with unplanned pregnancy and those sorts of things. So this is the bottom line, y'all, is we get to disciple our Christian youth, whether it's in a public school, because those Christian kids will come up to us after we've been there all day, and they'll say, I know y'all are Christians. I thank you for coming to my school and talking about abortion, because none of my kids think I'm crazy. So the Christian kids get who we are. And the other kids sometimes do too, and they'll go, you're pro-life, aren't you? I'm like, we're pro-truth. We're just pro-truth. We want you to know the truth. Doesn't matter what I believe, because I'm not going to be in that room with you making a decision. Doesn't matter what anybody believes. It matters what do you know that's true. And so we don't take sides in all this. So we want to disciple them, because they're going to impact their culture better than we are, because their culture is impacting them. And so they will impact that culture better than we ever could. There's another video and here's where we're going to stop, is parents aren't talking to their kids about sex. The kids tell us that. The teachers, the public school teachers tell us that. And the student pastors tell us that. So over COVID, one of the good things that we had to do is we had to put all of our programs onto a platform that our public school teachers could send out to virtual kids and to those that were being homeschooled because of COVID. And so we went, ding, ding, ding. That's how we do something we've always wanted to do with the churches. We get called to go, I'm doing in 2 weeks from Wednesday night, I'm doing a parents of middle schoolers presentation with our middle school teacher from Tennessee to talk to the parents about what their middle school student needs to know, what the teachers are telling us, and what the kids are telling our middle school teachers. And so we created a parent resource. This right here, it's an online, they pay the fee, and the president of the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board, who used to preach, he was a pastor in Alabama, Randy Davis, do y'all know him? Okay, Randy Davis looked at me and he said, you're not charging enough for that. And I said, I appreciate that, Dr. Davis, but that, First Baptist Hendersonville, they can probably buy one of these for every one of their kids. And Long Hollow Baptist can do the same. They're big Baptist churches. They can buy one for every one of their kids at $55 a piece and download it. These smaller churches can't do that, and parents can't do it. So we want them to have a resource that's in their price budget. So that's why it's priced so low. And it's usually got a $5 coupon on it anyway. If they go through ALCAP or something, they're going to get $5 off or whatever. But it basically takes them through the gender account of sex and marriage and relationships, because they don't have a clue what marriage is for anymore. They don't have a clue that God actually designed male and female and why. So it's a video-driven session, and the kids get to watch a video that's 20 to 25 minutes long, and then they have this deep dive homework package that they can do. And they can download this homework package along with their video, or they can request, and we'll send them out these little booklets, you know, that people want. But it's going to take all of us, all hands on deck, and the church has got to work with the organizations in the community, and they have to impact the kids where they are. And they are in public schools, private schools, homeschooled. And in Tennessee, they're leaving public schools by the thousands because of what's going on up there. We've got some really wonky, crazy anti-Christian literature being taught from kindergarten all the way through. So that's, I'm shutting it off right here because we got to go. But clearly, I truly, honestly believe that if our legislature in Alabama doesn't do something about sex ed, the Planned Parenthood here in Birmingham is going to take it over, particularly in Birmingham and Montgomery and Mobile and maybe Huntsville. Some of the outer county areas are going to be safe, and you would probably say the same thing. So they're way more funded than we are. That's just a laugh. That's like a little bucket of water to the ocean. They're funded. They have the manpower. They have the media. And they have corporate America, the woke corporations. And so we have none of that. But we have God. We have the power of the Holy Spirit. We have His truth. And we are an army that if it's just one of us, we should be making some inroads in this. So I'm going to end now. And if you have questions, I will be here as long. Well, I think I've got a podcast with you. So I will be here as long as Chris allows me. But I've got more materials. I've got the Planned Parenthood literature up here. I've got a copy of a handout that proves that Marxism is based in the destruction of the family and the church. From a guy that, not Karl Marx, but somebody in the 1920s, Wilhelm Reich, who actually coined the phrase sexual revolution. We all thought it came from the 60s, right? I did. But 1920s, because he's a Marxist. And if you can destroy the family, mother, father, married home, you can destroy the church. And that was his goal. So I've got that document if you want to copy that. But y'all have been awesome. Thank you so much. This is wonderful to be here. It just is so encouraging because we're out there like undercover missionaries in public schools taking the fire every day and the darts that come at us and the media and all that. So it's just nice to be I can breathe in here. I don't have to worry that you're going to go out and call the media or something. You may, but I hope not. So I'll be up here to answer any questions that you have. If you have a question from the group, that's fine. But I don't want to impede anybody that needs to go and get back to church and do all the wonderful things that you guys do. Julia?
So you have a parents of middle school meeting. Where is that? Like, can we go to that meeting so we can get a picture of what we would be asking our pastors in the middle
Yeah,
schools?
sure. It's in Hendersonville, at Hendersonville First Baptist. I'm hoping that what's going to happen, it's in Tennessee. What I'm hoping, Julie, you brought up a good point that I didn't make. What I'm hoping, right now, I told you we need a part-time educator for middle school, possibly 2, and we need a part-time educator, possibly a full-time educator for high school right now. We are in urgent need for those positions right now in Birmingham. Because if we had those positions, those educators would then be able to go to your churches here. Now, I'll come. I'm going with Chris to some church in April. I'll come, but it's just going to have to fit into that getting me down here. I'm usually here every other Monday, but if I know well enough in advance, I can plan it. But if we can get somebody in this office that is the outreach person, whether they're teaching in the schools or they're meeting with you all in your home churches, going and doing parent education, the churches invite us, and that's why we created this, because we're like, we can't go to every church. We cover 13 counties in Tennessee. Do you know how many churches there are in Tennessee? A lot, just like Alabama. So we couldn't possibly cover all those churches. So we created this to be able to give this to parents.
But if we knew you were going to a church to speak to tell that church, then I can bring 2 more churches to come be there so we can grow them faster.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about, collaborating and walking together. We got to get out of our silo. We're too siloed and too like, this is my lane, stay in my lane, you stay in yours. Well, we're never going to make a dent in this culture if we don't. We got to get out of the silos. Good question. Okay, I'll be right here. If y'all need to ask me any questions, I'm going to stay right here.
So we appreciate your work, and I just want to say this before we close in prayer. You can't see this probably on the stream, but this is my family. My eldest daughter, Lauren, was adopted, and her birth mother, in my view, is a hero. Just a wonderful person, and a United Methodist orphanage in Taipei reached out to her and she gave birth. This young woman, who was my daughter's birth mother, worked full time in the day and went to high school at night, and she gave birth to Lauren. And it's one in a zillion chance, but this birth mother, if she could just know that Lauren is now a business major and making a tremendous difference on her college campus, I'm thankful that you chose life. So thank you. Can we close in prayer? Thank you, Joy. Thank you so much, Greg. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to hear about what you're doing, and I pray your richest blessings on these two wonderful servants. Lord, thank you for everyone who came today. I pray that you would show us our place in this vision to make a tremendous difference in the next generation. Lord, we love you, we praise you, and we pray in Christ's name. Amen.